welcome back to the Formal Review. Today, we'll be having a very special episode. Now sit back, maybe grab a drink, and let's talk about this movie.
What's up, everyone?
I have shed innocent blood.
Welcome.
Excuse me. Sorry about that.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Welcome back to the Formal Review. This is Season 4, Episode 19, and I thank you all for tuning in once again. Now, happy October, everyone. We have reached the first full month of fall.
Makes me want to buy school supplies. I would send you a bouquet of newly sharpened pencils if I knew your name and address.
So with October, obviously, comes Halloween.
Can you dig it?
So with that, what I'm going to be doing over the course of this next month is be looking back at Halloween/horror movies.
Come and play with us.
Now, these movies were chosen by all my followers. You voted, and these are the films that you chose. And I thank you very much for casting your vote.
I'm your number one fan.
Now, this is the final episode in the 2021 Halloween series. We started this off with Rosemary's Baby, then we looked at Midsummer, the director's cut, and then on the last episode was a double feature with The Shining and Doctor Sleep. So definitely go listen to those episodes, but this analysis is going to be on the 1974 horror film and comedic classic Young Frankenstein. So stay tuned. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. Like, how do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps that people like to listen on? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every single one of those questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing my podcast. And best of all, it's absolutely 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with some great sponsors. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. Again, that's anchor.fm/start. And I can't wait to hear your podcast. Now, before I get into anything, I do want to preface this episode with a slight spoiler warning. However, this movie came out in 1974. You've had time to watch it, but if you really haven't seen it by now, go watch it first, come back and listen to what I have to say about it. It's good, it's funny, but if you don't care about that, keep listening. Also, I know I talk about this at the end, but the data shows that most people don't listen to that part, so I want to talk about it here and reiterate the importance of leaving reviews on your favorite subscription services. I do read those because I do want to grow, because these episodes are really for all you listeners out there, and I want to keep this entertaining. So what do you want to hear? Do you want to hear games? Do you want to hear more of the 4K stuff? Do you want to hear me talk about a certain movie? If you want to come on and talk to me about something, for you want to debate, I'm always open to do stuff like that. So you can always reach out to me on social media. I always want to grow and improve, and
Just because something works doesn't mean that it cannot be improved.
so if there's something that you want me to improve on, let me know, and I will grow as such. Anyway, so Young Frankenstein is a 1974 comedy horror film directed by Mel Brooks. The screenplay was written by Brooks and Gene Wilder, who all starred in the lead role as the title character. He plays this descendant of the infamous Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and Peter Boyle stars as the monster. Now it also has co-stars Terry Garr, Cloris Leachman, Marty Feldman, Madeline Kahn, Kenneth Mars, Richard Haydn, and Gene Hackman. Now this film is somewhat based on Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, but it's also a parody of the many adaptations of this story and the overall classic horror film genre. So much so that Brooks actually shot the picture entirely in black and white, which was a rare thing to happen in the 1970s. He also put in a 1930s style opening credits, and then also used scene transitions similar to that of a PowerPoint presentation. When it was originally released, it was a box office success and grossed $86.2 million on a $2.78 million budget. It has critical acclaim from critics and currently holds a 94% 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on 67 reviews with an average rating of 8.6 out of 10. The consensus reads, quote, "Made with obvious affection for the original Young Frankenstein is a righteously silly spoof featuring a fantastic performance by Wilder. It has a 94% rating based on over 100,000 audience reviews with an audience score of 4.4 out of 5. It also ranks number 28 on Total Films magazine's list of 50 greatest comedy films of all time, number 56 on Bravo's list of 100 funniest movies, and number 13 on American Film Institute's list of 100 funniest movies. Then in 2003, it was deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant by the United States National Film Preservation Board and was selected to be put in the Library of Congress National Film Registry. It then later was adapted also by Brooks as a stage musical. Now, the film itself received nominations for the Academy Award for Best Sound and Best Adapted Screenplay, and Brooks himself considers the film his finest, though he admits not his funniest. But why? Because the film honestly stays honorable to the films and the stories that it parodies. Since 1910, there have been about 57 films based on the famous Mary Shelley novel Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. And that story itself has influenced media way beyond the horror genre, from the Rocky Horror Picture Show to Looney Tunes to even Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, the original novel tells a story of Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a sapient creature in an unorthodox scientific experiment. Now, Shelley started writing the story when she was 18, and it was published anonymously in London on January 1st, 1818, when she was 20. And then her name was first appeared in the second edition, which was published in 1821. Now, while she was writing this, she was traveling through Europe along the River Rhine in Germany, stopping at Gersheim, which is about 11 miles or 17 kilometers from Frankenstein Castle, where 200 years before an alchemist engaged in similar type of experience. She then went into the areas of Geneva, Switzerland, where much of the story itself takes place. And she talked about occult and galvanism between her friends and then also her future husband, Percy B. Shelley. And then herself, her husband, and then Lord Byron in 1816 had this competition between themselves to see who could write the best horror story. Now, after thinking for a little bit, Shelley was then inspired to write Frankenstein after imagining this scientist who created life and was horrified by what he made. And one of the biggest themes in the novel is obviously the pursuit of knowledge as Victor attempts to surge beyond accepted human limits and assess human life. This act of creation basically gets to a point to destroying everyone that is dear to him, and his obsessive hatred of the monster leads to his death. And then this shows that there are levels to the idea of what is a monster. Nowadays, the creature himself is aligned. When somebody says Frankenstein, they usually in their head be thinking the 8 feet tall creature. However, as the story points out, the creature isn't the monster here. When somebody says Frankenstein, they're aligning it with the doctor. And so that again goes into the idea of what is a monster. The creature was only a dead body at peace, and then Victor brought him back. He then only wants to be loved. But Victor's selfishness alienate him from society, and then so who is the real monster here? Is it the one who's at peace, or is it the one who's so ambitious, so secretive, and so selfish that he gets alienated from society? Wouldn't he be the true monster, as he's eventually consumed by hatred of his creation? Now, Young Frankenstein not only draws from that story and also the 1931 Frankenstein film, but it also takes some inspiration from the sequels, such as The Bride of Frankenstein and The Son of Frankenstein. Rather, as another sequel in the series, the film really satires the early on Hollywood horror films. Wilder stars as Dr. Frederick Frankenstein.
It's pronounced Frankenstein.
Sorry, Frankenstein, the grandson of the original mad scientist, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, which is pronounced exactly how I'm saying it. Now, this is essentially a sequel, but it's also a spoof at the same time, which is the genius of Mel Brooks when it comes to this film. It then follows the young Dr. Frankenstein as he visits the location of his grandfather's original experiments when he inherits the family castle in his grandfather's will. Now, at the beginning of the film, he is ashamed point and distancing himself from the stories of his grandfather's work and also the madness of his family's reputation.
Yes, we all know what he did. But I'd rather be remembered for my own small contributions to science and not because of my accidental relationship to a famous cuckoo.
But then when he visits the castle, he is drawn to his family's destiny.
No escaping, that's for me! Destiny! Destiny! No escaping, that's for me!
Especially when he sees his grandfather's secret lab notes that show more of his work in creating life from dead bodies. He then starts obviously descend into the same level of obsession that his grandfather did. Now, when creating this film, Brooks set out to counter one of the most common criticisms of the Frankenstein adaptations, which is oversimplification of the monster into this two-dimensional beast that just terrorizes people. And this is because this idea is contrary to what Shelley's original novel was trying to do. With her novel, she shows the creature being eloquent and also teaching himself to read. He longs for this companionship, but he also suffers from the doctor's abandonment. This is why, in a way, he puts in the no matter how ridiculous it is, and has the creature love violin music. And furthermore, this film looks and sounds exactly like the films that it's parodying. The soundtrack, the haunting violin, the cracks of thunder, the howling of wolves are so famous in the Hollywood horror classics. And there's even very little daylight in the film, and most of the films are at nighttime, or if they're inside, they're lit up by fire or candlelight. And there's numerous callbacks in this film to the older ones, such as direct scenes such as the one with the little girl, to where the brain is obtained.
Abby someone. Abby who? Abby Normal. I'm almost sure that was the name.
And even so much to the props in the film. The props were actually the same ones that were originally used in the first film. So this film is an homage and uses the same props. So what? What's the significance on it? Well, it also deals with the same themes of identity and madness that not only the other films dealt with, but also the original novel. So in the film, no one really being who they think they are. Frederick insists that he is a Frankenstein when he's really a Frankenstein. Elizabeth isn't as hands-off as her fiance wants her to believe, nor does Inga turn out to be this naive blonde woman she seems to be. And the monster actually isn't a monster at all. In fact, at the end of the film, the monster and Frederick actually have swapped identities. This is what the original story went into, as well as what is it to be a monster. The monster is a monster because others see him as a monster. When others see him as a distinguished gentleman, he becomes one, and this can be applied to the creature as well. See what I did there? Now, this touches also on the Sekanite theme of madness, and what's really interesting here is that the characters who should be sane and normal, like the doctor or the inspector, are actually the craziest, and the ones who you would expect to be crazy, like Igor, are actually more mentally stable and in control of their life than you would expect them to be. This shows how madness is all relative. Everyone, for the most part, in this movie is completely nuts. This shows that being mad is actually more interesting and also a lot more common than, quote, normal people would like to admit. And this is why the idea of normal is whatever you want it to be, outside of being a murderer or serial killer. I mean, you just look at how movie fandom has skyrocketed, and also just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Game of Thrones. The cultural zeitgeist has really made what 20 years ago would have been thought as nerdism as the new normal. And this, again, goes into how do you define normal? It really states, again, outside of murdering and serial killing or any other outliers like that, normal is really a construct, and that really you have to learn to accept everyone for how they are. Always be open to learn about other people and open to hear other people and their viewpoints. Everyone is normal and everyone should be accepted as such. So this film explores the distinction between sane, insane, and madness. And overall, though, this film remains one of the best adaptations of the Frankenstein myth. It may not be a traditional horror film, but it has everything that makes those films those films. Plus, it will also make you laugh. The cast is great, obviously led by Wilder, and you add in Feldman, Leachman, Garr, and Hackman, and they all bring very good comedic chops, and till this day, this film is still hilarious. It highlights the silly parts of the actual genre, while also committing wholeheartedly to every single thematic and visual aspects of them. It's a satire, a sequel, and a tribute to everything that came before it. And frankly, it's such a lovely time to rewatch this film, especially around Halloween. Now, what did you think of that film? Again, this is the final episode in the Halloween analysis series. Thank you everyone for listening in. Thank you everyone for voting this year. And what's that?
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Formal Review. We hope you'll join us again.